Guess who? It's John Pollock along with John Ramdeen, and our fans in Buffalo now have an official main event for UFC 210, which is coming up Saturday, April the 8th. It was the fight that was expected for this card, but now it's official. Light heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier will defend against Anthony Johnson. This was the only fight to make for the championship at 205 pounds. And for those that thought they would see them in Toronto, it's a short drive if you want to go see them in Buffalo.
Super cool. I was satisfied with the fight they had announced between Chris Weidman and Gegard Mousasi. That, to me, is a main event caliber fight.
But on a pay-per-view?
I understand.
Come on,
I understand what you're saying. Maybe not on pay-per-view, but when you're thinking about fighting at the highest level, when you think about the top of the 185-pound division, does this fight have title implications? You have a former champion. You have a guy that's been a champion in numerous organizations. Two guys fighting at the highest level. That's why I would be satisfied. I understand what you're saying when it comes to pay-per-view. You're trying to add some more things. And now you add Daniel Cormier and Anthony Rumble Johnson. The fight, as you pointed out, was supposed to happen in Toronto. Very, very intriguing fight. These guys know each other. They've been training for each other. What version are we going to see when they get this chance to rematch? Very exciting stuff for your fight fan.
Yeah, this is it's coming at a very interesting time in Daniel Cormier's career. He's coming off his latest injury that took him out of the Toronto card in December. So you've delayed it by a couple of months. That's not going to make a marginal difference. But this has always been the analysis of this particular fight, is that the longer it's delayed, the more Daniel Cormier is getting older in this sport. And Anthony Johnson is someone I feel at some point will be light heavyweight champion. The question will he be able to catch Daniel Cormier in April? We saw the rematch. This is the rematch from 2015, where that was a fight Anthony Johnson nearly stopped Daniel Cormier in.
Yeah, Cormier's smart. He's an analyst. He understands the bigger picture, and he knows. He's already been in there with Anthony Rumble Johnson. He feels the power of he felt the power of Anthony Rumble Johnson when he was sent flying to the canvas. So the idea is, okay, I know what's coming at me. I need to be in the best shape humanly possible. I can't have any type of injuries, or as little as humanly possible, because of the fact that Anthony Rumble Johnson, as you pointed out, everybody in the industry believes that at some point Rumble Johnson is going to be the next 205-pound champion. Sometimes, though, we've seen Rumble just not live up to expectations, not do the things that he needs to do. He seems to be on fire, but when you look at Daniel Cormier, is this the guy that will stand in his way? And then, of course, a lot of people anticipating that fight between John Jones and Anthony Rumble Johnson. So if Rumble wants that crack at John Jones, he's got to go out there and do what we think. We all believe he's capable of going out there and decimating Daniel Cormier. Also, as you pointed out, no spring chicken. So he knows that this fight has to happen sooner rather than later. But again, you have to be in the best shape. You have to be you can't be as banged up as you know in this game, especially coming from AKA. Those guys notorious for training extra hard. So if you are injured, you got to bail on the fight.
Now, you mentioned AKA, a very solid unit, have been for years. The Black Zillions, on the other hand, it seems that it's barely being kept together at this point. And Rashad Evans was very public about it recently on the MMA Hour. And I think getting ready for a championship fight, you're putting a real focus on the state of that camp and how Anthony Johnson is preparing for this fight. I'm sure you're going to ask him, and he's going to say there's no problems at all. He's going to be fine with or without the Black Zillions and downplay all the drama that's been happening, but that's a factor.
Sure, but at the same time, I think when you, based on the things Henry Hooft has been saying, the whispering you're hearing, and people in the know, it's basically the Black Zillions is a facility, and all the people that helped that formula at the Black Zillions, they've just moved locations. So Henry Hooft's
not all of them.
Not
There's
everybody.
Been a splintering
I understand, but that's the way it works in a lot of gyms. You know, you go in there, they have like Vitor Belfort. We know that Vitor Belfort spent time training at the Black Zillions. Vitor
spent time training everywhere.
That's true, and that's what it's just like TriStar, just like AKA, like a lot of these places where some of the big names, they might come there and they might train, but they have their specific coaches. Anthony Johnson, Henry Hooft is his guy. So it doesn't matter wherever Henry Hooft goes, Anthony Johnson's going to follow. And some of the top coaches that Henry Hooft has allegiances with or alliances with, that you know that they'll be there to help Anthony Rumble Johnson. I think he's going to be fine. He's one of the biggest names. People understand what it means to attach themselves to a guy like Anthony Rumble Johnson.
I always think for these championship fights, and this would be a perfect example of one, is that you do want to have another key light heavyweight fight on this
100%.
card. It gives you, at worst, you have someone that's ready, that's training for this in case, God forbid, there's an injury. But also on top of that, someone looks great on the same card where you have a championship title defense. There's the natural matchmaking that can come out of it. Now, we know John Jones is still hovering in the picture until the summer, but looking at this card, I mean, the light heavyweights, it's not super deep and rich with contenders. Would you like to see some of those light heavyweights, in particular, one in Misha Cirkunov, be on this Buffalo card?
That's exactly, you've nailed it, because it's Buffalo. Not that far from Toronto, so he'll have that fan base following him from Toronto to Buffalo. Another thing, Daniel Cormier, Misha Cirkunov's one of his picks when he's talking about some of the top prospects for 2017. Misha Cirkunov was his guy. He's on a roll right now. He looks the part. Misha Cirkunov is the guy, and you're hurting for Canadian stars. This is the guy that you bank on. It's a win-win and all. And when you look at it, because he's all of his wins in the UFC, getting finishes, looking good, you can sell Misha Cirkunov.
What kind of level do you see Misha Cirkunov being pushed towards? Because I thought the Shogun fight that he suggested in Toronto was a great idea. Unfortunately, they went a different direction with Shogun. Are you looking the level of an Alexander Gustafsson next? Because when you have such a small level of contenders, just quantity-wise, I don't know if Misha Cirkunov, you want to throw him to the wolves yet, but that might be of necessity now, because he realistically, you take John Jones out of the mix, he could be one fight away from being discussed for it. Beyond John Jones, there is no one ready for that title opportunity against the winner of Cormier and Johnson.
Yeah, and Misha understands that. He understands that if you're not looking at your division, if you're not looking at how things are unfolding, if you're not looking at your path to riches and what it means to get to a UFC championship, you're not playing the full game. There's so many great fighters out there that fighting is just one small part of it. If your idea is, I just want to get to the UFC to see how my skills stack up against the some of the other best fighters in the world, that's great. But it's not just about that. You're trying to, get your name out there. You're trying to be a big star. This is the entertainment game. Misha understands that. It's just like Henry Cejudo. Do you think Henry Cejudo wanted that crack at Demetrius Johnson so young in his career, or would he benefit from having a number of years under his belt in the world's biggest mixed martial arts promotion? Those are luxuries that he doesn't have control of. So you have to take the opportunities when they come. Misha is well aware of the state of the UFC's light heavyweight division. You got to keep winning fights. When you look the part, you keep winning, you're spectacular, you'll eventually get your call. And he's just doing all the things he needs to do, he believes, to eventually be ready if he ever gets that title shot.
Could you imagine if Chris Weidman had made that choice to go to light heavyweight?
Yeah, I know.
Fighting on this card, he could have ended up backdooring himself into a title shot on this card.
It's very true. That's the way it works. I would love to see him at 205 pounds.
I do too.
As you know, I'm a big fan of all these athletes that are able to move back and forth as long as the fight's there. And when I say the fight, I mean the money fight for the fighters, the most interesting fight. I don't think a fighter should fight at a specific weight class, just like Shogun, for example. I'm not saying Shogun could drop down to 185 pounds, but John Vellante, as much as he's a quality opponent, I'd rather see Shogun fighting Rashad Evans at 185 pounds or 205 pounds. I think there's just some of those fights you got to figure out who your athlete is, what their drawing power is, how many miles they have, and use them accordingly. Like BJ Penn, for example, I don't think he was used properly.
Do you foresee Rashad Evans being able to get cleared in the state of New York? I mean, it makes a lot of sense to be on this card in Buffalo, where he's from nearby, and of course the connection with Anthony Johnson, and both of them training for this card.
And you have to imagine that he wants to be a part of the card. As you pointed out, he's from Niagara Falls. Buffalo, not that far away. He probably has a lot of family and friends still there, so he's probably doing whatever he can right now to make sure that the commission allows him to compete in Buffalo.
Yeah, I think that's all it comes down to,
of course,
commission approval or not. So that is coming up April the 8th. You have your main event, Daniel Cormier and Anthony Johnson for the light heavyweight championship.